MySafetyTrainingOnline.com presents Radiation Safety. Welcome. What you will learn. We'll talk about ionizing radiation, giving a definition and its hazards. We'll talk about radiation protection activities, the identification of unrestricted and restricted, the identification of occupational workers for radiation exposure, as well as the identification of members of the public and their radiation exposure. Lastly, we'll talk about how to limit required doses to the general public. This program will discuss the policy on declared pregnant workers, the policy on personal monitoring, the procedures for record keeping as well as program evaluation, and what records a company should keep. Section 1, Introduction to Radiation Safety. Radiation terms defined. Ionizing radiation is a radiation that has sufficient energy to remove electrons from atoms. Ionizing radiation is usually found in a radiography department or dental department. Radioactive decay. It is one source of radiation is the nuclei of an unstable atoms. For radioactive atoms to become more stable, nuclei eject or emit subatomic particles and high-energy photons, such as gamma rays. Unstable isotopes, such as radium, radon, uranium, and thorium, for example, exist naturally and are a source of radioactive decay. Other radiation is continually being made naturally or by human activities, such as splitting atoms in nuclear reactor. They release ionizing radiation. Major types of radiation emitted are usually a result of spontaneous decay, such as alpha or beta particles or gamma rays. X-rays are another type of major radiation which arrives from processes outside the nucleus. Any electromagnetic or particulate radiation capable of producing ion pairs by interaction with matter. Scope is limited to X and gamma rays, alpha particles, beta particles, neutrons, and charged nuclei. Important biologically since media can be altered. Alpha particles are energetic, positively charged particles that rapidly lose energy when passing through matter. They are commonly emitted in the radioactive decay of the heaviest radioactive elements such as uranium and radium. Beta particles are fast-moving positively or negatively charged electrons emitted from the nucleus during a radioactive decay. Humans are exposed to beta particles from man-made and natural sources such as tritium, carbon-14, strontium-90. Beta particles are more penetrating than alpha particles but are less damaging over equally traveled distances. Like visible light and X-rays, gamma rays are weightless packets of energy called photons. Gamma rays often accompany emission of alpha or beta particles from the nucleus or are absorbed by tissue, thus constituting a radiation hazard for the entire body. Several feet of concrete or a few inches of lead may be required to stop energetic gamma rays. X-rays. X-rays are high-energy photons produced by the interaction of charged particles with matter. X-rays and gamma rays have essentially the same properties but differ in origin. Because of their many uses, X-rays are the single largest source of man-made radiation exposure. A few meters of lead can stop medical X-rays. Here we can see graphically depicted alpha particles, beta particles, and gamma rays. Radiation is used on an ever-increasing scale in medicine, dentistry, and industry. Many users of man-made radiation include medical facilities such as hospitals, pharmaceutical facilities, research and teaching institutions, nuclear reactors. Many of these facilities generate some radioactive waste and some release the controlled amount of radiation into the environment. Radioactive particles are also used in common consumer products. Humans are primarily exposed to natural radiation from the sun, cosmic rays, and naturally occurring radioactive elements found in the Earth's crust. Radon, which emits from the ground, is another important source of natural radiation. Cosmic rays from space include energetic protons, electrons, gamma rays, and X-rays. The primary radioactive elements found in the Earth's crust are uranium, thorium, potassium, and their radioactive derivatives. These elements emit alpha and beta particles or gamma rays. Depending upon the level of exposure, radiation can pose a health risk. It can adversely affect individuals directly exposed as well as their descendants. Radiation can affect cells of the body, increasing the risk of cancer or harmful genetic mutations, or, if the dose is large enough, cause massive tissue damage. Section 2. Radiation Protection Activities. Protection of the patient. Check proper patient ID prior to beginning any radiographic procedure. Implement the 10-day rule when radiographing female patients within childbearing age. Utilize protective shielding such as gonad or thyroid on all patients within the applicable. All repeat radiographs must be completed under the direction of a supervised, qualified practitioner. Wear a dosimeter badge on the collar of the uniform at all times. If wearing a lead apron, wear the badge on the outside. When assisting with a fluoroscopic procedures, always wear a lead apron. Energized labs and dental clinics. Students are not permitted to operate X-ray equipment without supervision of faculty. Students are not permitted to expose another student to ionizing radiation while in an energized lab. Students and faculty must wear radiation dosimeter devices when operating inside a dental clinic. Workers taking radiographic exposures in a radiography lab must comply with the following criteria. All outside doors to the energized lab must be closed, and workers must stand completely behind a lead-lined wall of the control booth when exposures are being taken. Exposures taken with ionizing radiation will only be made using specific phantoms for lab experiments and educational training. Failure to comply with policies and procedures may result in dismissal of the student from the program in which they are enrolled. Section 3. Identification of radiation area personnel. Occupational workers are defined as students enrolled in a radiography program. Dental programs and all faculty associated with each program, and all others not listed as occupational workers, are considered public. Students will follow the protocol established for each clinical site regarding safe radiation practices. Dental clinics, protection for the public is provided by clinical diagnosis and selection, physical separation, suitable barriers, and distance from X-ray rooms. Criteria for meeting policy. A letter from the physician is needed for confirmation of pregnancy. Contact the program coordinator as soon as she suspects pregnancy. Program coordinators will assign remaining clinical rotations where students will be able to complete competencies with little or no exposure to ionizing radiation. Worker is required to purchase fetal monitoring devices. Worker must sign a pregnancy release form, and dental hygiene workers that are pregnant must obtain written release from their physicians indicating permission to be exposed to dental radiographs. Workers are required to wear radiation monitoring devices when in energized labs, dental clinics, or clinical education sites. Dosimeter badges are to be worn on the collar, near the neck and upper chest area. If the lead apron is worn, the device should be worn outside the apron. If a worker does not have his or her film badge while in the laboratory, he or she may not participate in the taking of radiographs. Radiation protection is monitored on a monthly basis. A report is issued by a radiation monitoring company calculating the individual's radiation exposure. Workers are required to initial their exposure reading every month. Copies of these reports are kept in the dental or radiography program coordinator's office. The radiation safety officer will assess the radiation safety plan yearly. If any adjustments are made, an addendum will be sent to the Department of Health Bureau of Radiation Control within 1 week. Records will be maintained until registration is terminated. Section 3, Radiation Summary. Ionizing radiation is a radiation that has sufficient energy to remove electrons from atoms. Radioactive decay is one source of radiation is a nuclei of unstable atoms. For these radioactive atoms to become more stable, the nuclei eject or emit subatomic particles and high-energy photons. Like visible light and X-rays, gamma rays are weightless packets of energy called photons. Gamma rays often accompany the emission of alpha and beta particles from the nucleus, or can be absorbed by tissue, thus constituting a radiation hazard for the entire body. Several feet of concrete and a few inches of lead may be required to stop more energetic gamma rays. The primary radioactive elements found in the Earth's crust are uranium, thorium, potassium, and their radioactive derivatives. These elements emit alpha and beta particles or gamma rays. Utilize protective shielding such as gonad and thyroid on all patients when applicable. Implementing the 10-day rule when radiographing female patients with childbearing age. Workers wear a radiation dosimeter device when operating in the dental lab and develop a criteria for meeting policy. A letter from physician is needed for confirmation of pregnancy. A worker is required to purchase a fetal monitoring device at her expense. Workers must stand completely behind lead-lined walls of a control booth while exposures are taken. Failure to comply with policies and procedures may result in dismissal of the worker from the program in which they are enrolled. Radiation is the energy that travels in the form of waves or high-speed particles. Radioactivity is the property of some atoms that cause them to spontaneously give off energy as particles or rays. Radioactive atoms emit ionizing radiation whenever they are stimulated.